morning, everyone. So the topic is health is wealth. What the slide earlier didn't say, it said I'm a personal trainer, it said I'm a nutritionist, it said I studied nutrition in Cambridge. What it does not say is that I'm an accountant. I'm not joking. I'm a CA. Okay. It gets worse. I'm also a CPA. It gets even worse. I'm a CFA. Okay. So why am I here talking to you about health? Maybe I should be talking about wealth, right? So I'm Kannan Raman. I'm 41 years old. I'm married. I have 2 children. They're 9 and 6. And by now, you know, I've studied some accounting. With that background, I worked at an accounting firm for many years in India and in the UK. And somewhere, as it happens, I was a very active child through school and college. You know, you did a little bit of studying, whatever you needed to study, but most of the time was spent in a playground, as I think all childhood should be. But then you start work, and computers were invented by then. Then you find out you're spending most of your time indoors, right? The playground becomes a distant memory, right? So I live in T Nagar in Chennai, opposite a ground, and most people who talk about it as something from an era gone by, right? Because who goes to a playground anymore? And the same thing happened to me. So you find out that you're spending most of your time indoors, you're spending a lot of time sitting, and then you're not quite paying attention to what you're eating as well, right? And it's more easier nowadays than ever before to get food at our beck and call. And so over a period of time, your health suffers, my health suffered, and then you stop somewhere and say enough is enough, right? And so the same thing happened. I said enough. I started reading a lot of magazines, everything I could get my hands on, and at the end of it, extremely confused. If anybody's read anything about health in the newspapers or the magazines, you know one thing, that today food X is great for you, tomorrow it is going to kill you. Yep, yep. So all you're left with is shaking your head, wondering what is going on, right? That was me shaking my head, what is going on? So I said, enough, it's time to study this properly, and that's when I went and got a bunch of certifications, studied this to say there is a science around all of this. We know a lot. It's not as confusing as it looks. We know a lot about good health. We know a lot about how to get there. But it doesn't make its way to all of you, right? A lot is lost in translation. So what I want to do today is talk about some of those big themes, yeah? And if an accountant can do it, so can you, yeah? There's no doubt about it. But I'll start with an example that hopefully all of you will relate to. This should be a familiar sight, I'm thinking, for what you all do, which is a person comes to you and says, this is how I've saved my money. I've got 50 in cash, I've got 30 in fixed deposits, I've got some savings in PF pension, and I've got 10 in equity. Yeah? Does that sound familiar as a starting point? And I guess the thought process goes as follows. That's a lot of money that's not working for you. Pay attention to that. FDs are great, but it's a modest return. You can do better. Saving for pension, yep, good idea. This is the big one. Fair enough? That's the big one. We say, okay, we need to have a conversation about this, right? Because nobody goes from 10 in equity to 50 anytime soon, right? There's a lot of education first, right? There's a lot of things people need to understand. But it's a big one, because if you don't do this, you're not going to meet your goals, right? So why does this happen? Some people just haven't paid attention. They haven't thought about making their money work for them. Or there's unreliable sources. You see a lot of that. You see unreliable sources of information. There's people who aren't operating ethically. Some people lack the discipline, right? There's a lot of anxiety and mental anguish involved when it comes to money. Or they just don't want to pay an advisor. Yep. Does that sound right? Yep. And who loses at the end of the day? It's them. It's the individual, right? So what's the outcome? They haven't thought about planning, right? So they get poor returns, sometimes lose capital depending on what they've done. They can't fund emergencies maybe. They haven't provided enough for the family, or they haven't provided enough for retirement, right? But either way, it's all bad news because they just haven't planned for it in a certain way. So I'm going to take exactly this example and say all of this is true for health. All of this is true, right? So when we talk about the cash, I'm going to say that's actually sleep. Okay? You're just not giving enough attention to it. It's right there. We've all got a bed at home. It's right there. We just don't give it enough attention, right? And we'll talk about why that's important. FDs are a great return. So is exercise, right? It's a modest return, so not a great return. Exercise is very, very beneficial for health, but it'll only go so far. Right? So most people exercise with the belief that that's going to give them all their goals, right? Now, exercise is great for health, make no mistake, but what we do find is very overstated. People assume I get up in the morning, I go for that 45-minute run, and that's it. Right? I can do whatever I like for the rest of the day, I'm in good shape. Right? Yeah. Not quite the way it works. It's good. I take the FD example. It's a good return, but you can do better, right? The greater return comes from elsewhere, okay? We take the example of savings. I equate that to stress. Yes, you have to keep an eye on it. Always keep an eye on it, right? And that's very sensible. The last one, we need to have a talk. Any guesses what that is? There we go. So I should just walk off right now because you all are already well aware, right? Absolutely. That's the one where we have to sit people down and say, you know what? We need to have a conversation about this, right? Because just with the equity example, you need to sit down, you need to understand why it matters, because it matters to everything you do, okay? Most of good health happens on your plate. It does not happen on a treadmill. Most of good health happens on a plate, yeah? And why does this happen? Very similar reasons to what we've seen in what you do, right? Some people just haven't thought about it, right? Usually you start thinking about it when you have a health scare, right? Or is that blood report and the doctor says, your LDL level is too high or your triglycerides are too high. It takes something like that to make you start thinking about it. And then there's the internet, right? The magical internet. No matter what you search for, you will find it. You can type, does the cabbage diet work? And it'll say, yes, it works. Right? That's a little worrying, right? That's a little worrying because there's a lot of unreliable information. And then we talk about pseudoscience. And that's the example of food X is good for you one day and the next day it's going to kill you, right? Because it's just not good science. And good science very rarely makes its way to all of you. Right? And then we've got guilt and anxiety, right? For a lot of people, it's a mental anguish. And we see that a lot when it comes to people thinking about losing weight or getting in better shape. It's a willpower battle every day, right? And a lot of it becomes a mental game. It's me, I'm not resisting these foods, right? It doesn't have to be that way. And the last reason, as we've seen, is they just don't want to pay for good advice, right? So the result ends up very similar as it happens in money matters, right? You get ill, often. And the example I give people, especially in Chennai or even in Delhi is, this weather change that happens in December, January? It's a time when most people fall sick. It's not normal. It's not normal to fall sick because weather change is not a reason to fall sick. The reason you fall sick is because you're not robust enough to resist the diseases. We are surrounded by germs all the time. Like right now, we are surrounded by millions of germs right here, right? But you won't fall sick because your body can deal with it, right? But something in the environment changes, even just a little, right? The weather change, and there's a sore throat, there's a bit of a cough and a cold, and before you know it, you're shutting all your windows and not going out for a couple of months, right? And that's not normal. That's not normal, right? It's a sign from your body that something isn't quite right, right? You're pretty vulnerable to falling sick, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. And then what you get is lifestyle diseases. What do I mean by lifestyle diseases? Over a period, you start worrying about things like type 2 diabetes, hypertension. All of those are lifestyle diseases because they're a result of lifestyle. The family is affected, okay? And this is an example I give a lot of people where they say, a lot of this is genetic. Right? A lot of people say they're very convinced that a lot of this is genetic. And what we tell people is some things are genetic, but today the genes that run through a lot of households, there are 3 strains of it. The first I call the Swiggy gene, the Zomato gene, or the Uber Eats gene. Right? It's actually lifestyle. We're making choices. That's not genetic. right? Especially when you talk about children, if the parents are ordering Swiggy, the child is eating Swiggy. It's not genetic. You made a choice for everybody in the family, right? And that's what we see happening a lot. It's a lifestyle thing that affects your family. And the last thing, retirement, which is you haven't planned for retirement financially. Well, is your body ready for retirement, right? Or is retirement going to be full of healthcare costs, right? That's a worry for many. So we say genetics is important. It's definitely important. And the example I give people is genetics loads the gun. Yep. But we pull the trigger. Yeah? We pull the trigger. So yes, all of us have certain different risks for various conditions, but none of that has to happen. It is not set in stone. Okay? It's lifestyle. And there's enough research now to back this up. So you're not born in most cases with anything. You're born with a completely clean slate. Okay? But it's then the environment and how you deal with the environment that decides whether you're then, falling sick or not. So this is an example I like to take. I call it the stress bucket. Okay? So the question is, each of us has a capacity to deal with stress. And by stress, I mean all sorts of stress. A poor diet is stress. Not enough sleep is stress. Right? Actual mental stress is stress. Right? And we all have a capacity of how much we can take. Right? Now let me know if this example resonates. Right? You're in college, you have a late night out, but you get up in the morning and you're fine. Right? You're just fine. Your body deals with it. Now that doesn't happen anymore, right? If you have a late night, it takes a few days to recover. Why does that happen? Because these cups come in various sizes. These cups come in various sizes. So, sorry, I have to go back. My mistake. So this is the stress cup. Now you decide what size your stress cup is. So when you were in college, I'm learning how to use this. So when we were in college, we were all there, right? No matter what you do, your body is able to deal with it, right? A late night out, you're eating out, your body just bounced right back the next day. Because we just didn't have all the stresses we've got today. So you can take more. Your body is very, very resilient, right? Whereas over a period, the size of that stress cup comes down. We start becoming very vulnerable. Why do we become vulnerable? It's the same factors again and again, right? Which is bad diet, poor sleep, exercise. All of it is stress on your body. And at some point, that cup is going to run over, right? And that's when your body is going to give you a signal and say, something isn't right. Does this ring a bell? So when you look at your stress cup, would you say this applies to you? So where would you like to be on this range? This side? This side, right? This is the place to be. Because then what you find is no matter what life throws at you, and we can't control what life throws at us, right? Seems like every day morning you've got this list of things to do, and when you sit down at night, you've still got the same list of things to do. Because so much has happened during the day. So life will keep throwing various situations at us, but where you want to be is at that big Starbucks cup. So that no matter what happens, you've got the capacity to deal with it. Yeah? So how do you do that? Right? Oh, sorry, what happens as a result? So you see headlines like this, right? Again and again in the press. Right? And what this is referring to is really a function of everything we've talked about, right? The environment around it is difficult. There's poor sleep, there's poor diet, all of that environment. There's also air pollution. I haven't talked about that. Right? But the quality of air you're breathing in a city today is really, really poor, right? So when people say, children in Bangalore have wheezing or coughing, or in Delhi, it's just a sign of the air quality, right? But all of that actually results in disease at various ages. And that's actually what's happening right now in India. If you take a simple example of just excess weight, right, which is a function of just lifestyle. Today, the population of Bombay, Bangalore, Pune, Calcutta, Hyderabad combined is actually overweight and obese, right? That's the scale of the problem we've got, right? And again, it's for the most part not the individual. It's the environment that has changed dramatically. 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't enough food going around, right? You had to walk a long way, go buy your groceries and come back. Yep. 20, 30 years ago, it was really, really easy to get, I mean, you didn't think of getting exercise, right? It was part of daily life. So when a lot of people say, my grandmother is in great health. Yeah, your grandmother or grandparents didn't have to deal with this environment, right? They had cleaner air, they had better quality food, they didn't have the stresses we have today. So for the most part, it's not you, it's not us. It's the environment. We are having to deal with something no generation has had to deal with yet. Right? And that's what is difficult for us. Right? We are not bad people. We don't have bad habits beyond a point. It's actually just the environment that's changed. And so we need to plan better. And we know, for the most part, that it's excess weight today that actually leads to most medical problems. So these are all of the conditions that have been very directly tied to just simple excess weight. Right? So Alzheimer's, for example, is actually called type 3 diabetes in the medical community today. It's actually called type 3 diabetes because that's actually how that builds up. But a lot of this is just directly tied to lifestyle and excess weight. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? So it's like with financial planning, right? A lot of people might know a lot about it, right? Some of the most educated people might know a lot about equity, might know a lot about planning, but they still got all the cash in the bank, right? I know people like that, right? They'll tell you about the capital asset pricing model, but where's your money? 8% FD, right? So knowing is not enough. We must do something about it, right? And that's honestly the reason we got around to setting up Daily 9, which is there is confusion everywhere. People don't know what to do, right? And everybody's expressing that cry for help in different ways, right? That gym membership that you take but you never use, right? What you're saying is, I want to do something about my health, right? Or that fitness tracker that you buy and put on your wrist. That's actually people saying, I want to do something about my health, right? But the question is what? Where is the answer that will actually give you things you can rely on, right? So the way I think about it is, so what can you do? The first thing is just take stock, right? It's like the balance sheet that we looked at first, right? What's your balance sheet look like? Okay. Now here's a question I like to put to people. So, and this is just a question of awareness. So we all trust doctors. Doctors are a great source of help, right? So doctors spend about 10,000 hours on medical school. Okay. Now, how much of that do you think is spent learning about nutrition? 500? Who thinks it's more than 500? More than 500 hours? A lot more? The answer is it's less than 20. Okay? So doctors in medical school spend less than 20 hours learning about food. Right? And this is not about the doctors. They've got enough to study. Right? The body is complex enough. But the reality of medical school is there's so much else to do that they aren't taught about food. Right? So does that mean don't go to doctors? Not at all. Not at all. Right? They will help as they always do. But that means we need to take more ownership, right? They will not be the answer to everything you want, right? We need to take ownership. So if you go back to, well, so what can you do? Okay? What is the single measure of health, right? So if you finish this conference and you all go back home, how do you tell if you are in need of attention or there's something you need to do? The last sentence there is the benchmark. Right? It's called height to waist ratio. Everybody can do this at home. Okay? So a simple way to tell if you're in good health or at risk of disease is to check if your waist is less than half your height. Okay? So my height is 180 centimeters. Okay? Half of that is 90 centimeters. That's about 34 inches. So if my waist is less than half my height, that's a very, very simple benchmark. Yeah? You don't need to do BMI, you don't need to do any other calculations. This is a simple, proven test to determine whether you're in good health or whether you need to pay attention. And you can just do this at home, right? Easily done. And you'll find that there are some countries globally who now use this as a test to check the health of the entire population. So Thailand today uses this as the test, right? All of the citizens of the country are taking this measurement, putting it into a database, And that's how the country measures if the population is in good health. Right? But that's a simple measure. The example I give, does that look familiar? Popular, right? Very familiar characters, people we love. They both have pretty much the same BMI, 34, 35. They pretty much have the same BMI. But look at the height to waist ratio for them. Right? Now that tells you who's in which shape, right? And again, the idea is it's simple. So the thing that we talk about is measuring your health is as easy as using a piece of string. Right? Take a piece of string, measure your height, fold it in half, see if it goes around your waist. Right? So all of you can measure your health with a piece of string. It's as simple as that. Yep. So what can you do? Take that one measure. Right? And that will tell you whether you need to act now or whether you're okay. Right? Now I'm being very simplistic. Obviously, we can always go take blood tests and do whatnot. Right? But this is a very simple measure. You can all do it at home. So talking briefly about daily 9, the way I think about it is we think of ourselves as the SIP. Yep. This is where you want to get to, right? You want to do a little bit, you want to do it often, you want to do it over the long term. That's how you get results. How do we do that? We combine the things we've talked about, right? So I've said you need to think about food, you need to think about activity, you need to think about sleep, you need to think about stress, right? Now that sounds like a lot to do, right? It sounds like I've put everything back on your plate. Right? But what we try and do is to say, okay, let's list it, all of it. What if you had a to-do list that says, do these 4 things? Do these 4 things every day. And that's fine. And this is how we prioritize things. Now, most people don't realize, but lack of sleep is one of the biggest risk factors to health today. Right? And can you imagine who's most worried about it? Swiss Re, the insurance company. They are extremely worried that the world is sleeping less. Yep. They're actually putting out publications saying that less sleep is associated with greater losses. And as an insurance company, they are very worried that the world is sleeping less. Right? That sounds quite strange, right? Of all people, a reinsurer is worried about less sleep. Right? But they are starting to see the link between health issues, between accidents, and the lack of sleep. So you've got people like Swiss Re saying the world needs to sleep more. Right? We've talked about diet, we've talked about training, and we talked about supplements. But this is how I'd stack the pyramid. Right? All we need to do is do the basics right. Right? Because we talk about health is wealth, right? We all have dreams, we all have aspirations, right? But without an able body, it's going to be very, very hard to achieve those, right? And I think a great example is the people that you see, the leaders around the world. A lot of them realize that now, right? I think I was talking to Babu about this, but you look at Satya Nadella from Microsoft, right? He looks pretty trim, right? He looks pretty trim, right? A lot of them do. Mark Zuckerberg looks trim. They all look in good shape. They don't have great fancy personal trainers. They don't. But they be sure to switch off from work, right? When they're off from work, they're off from work. They set aside time every day, right? Just to do the simple things, right? 30 minutes a day, just to go for a walk, right? 30 minutes a day, just to do some reading, right? That's all it takes, yeah? But you need to schedule the time. What I do is, it's in my calendar, okay? So the joke I have with my wife is, if you're going for dinner, I'll send her an invite. And she knows this. She says, we're going out for dinner Saturday night, right? And I'm like, she's like, okay, I'll send you an invite. Because no matter what I'm doing, it's in my calendar. And then I take my phone, I look at my calendar, and if it's in my calendar, I have to do it. It says right there. It's not me. That calendar is telling me I have to do this now for the next 30 minutes, right? So I've taken time to plan it, I've put it somewhere, and then I'm like, it says right there that I'm going to go out for dinner. So I have to go out for dinner, right? And that's a very, very simple way. We've all got phones. We've all got a calendar in our phones. Put that time in. And you know when you get that alarm every day, that starts playing on your mind, right? That's how habits form. That's how habits form. So, you know, all these things we learnt in childhood, that carry us through life. I used to play cricket when I was a child, right? But then when you grow up and you pick up your bat, you still know how to play. Why is that? Because you did it for so long when you were a child that it's hardwired into your body, right? We didn't realize it, but we learned those habits with conscious effort. So what I would suggest, if you could, is take your diaries out. Could you take your phones out right now? Take your phones out. And I'd say pick one thing that you could do, right? Pick it at a time when you have control, right? I like to think of first thing in the morning or late in the evening, because I know during the day is complete chaos, right? Take out your calendars and block 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. It could be anything, 15 minutes, right? Pick from going for a walk. It could just be inside your house, yeah? You don't need fancy shoes, you don't need an activity tracker, right? Just walk up and down your hall. Put some music you like, something, set 15 minutes, right? Set an alarm for it, and when it shows up, it says right there you have to do it, right? Do that for a week, do that for a month. Then make the 15, 20 minutes, right? Slowly work your way up to an hour, right? It's the philosophy, right? Journey of 1,000 miles begin with one step, right? For me, this is the one step, right? Because the battle today is not this. I think most of you look at this and go, yeah, I sort of know that, right? This guy isn't speaking rocket science right now, right? But what's the battle today? It's time. How is all this going to make its way into your life? It's time, right? So when we talk to people about this, we don't say eat well. We say, no, make time for shopping. We say, don't go shopping on a hungry stomach, because I have no idea what you're going to buy, right? But it's forming habits. So if you do nothing else from this, two things. Get a measuring tape, right? Height to waist. Yep. Set out a calendar. Set aside 15 minutes a day for something that you enjoy doing, right? It doesn't even have to be health related, because a lot of it is mental as well. Remember the habits you used to have but you never do? I think they are a great place to start. Yeah? Don't pick something completely unheard of. Think of things you used to enjoy doing in the past. Yeah? It could be anything. It could be just reading a book. It could be listening to music. Pick anything that gives you joy. Don't go running because it's a punishment. Yeah? Because you're not going to stick with it. Yeah? Pick something you enjoy, put it in the diary. Are we going to do that? Super. I've got 2 minutes, 44 seconds. So this is in a nutshell what we do at the Daily 9, right? So we worry about the failing health of people. We worry that you don't have reliable information. We worry you don't have a plan, right? All the theory in the world is great, right? But you have the power if you have a plan. So what do? We are called the Daily 9 because we say there are 9 rules you follow every day. 9 rules. Right? We've set out the 9 rules. They cover food, they cover sleep, they cover activity. Just a couple of screens, quick go through. This is what the screens look like. We don't need to do it right now. And this is where we want to get to, right? So if you need a goal, I would say that's where you need to get to. You need to get to that biggest stress cup where your body is resilient. Yep. I'm sorry. Can I get the last slide up, please? And the last thing I would suggest is, so we run 10-week programs. The next one starts on the 25th of Feb. Have a look at the website, understand something about it. But if you do nothing else after this, 2 things, right? Put time in your diary. Yeah, put time in your diary for something you enjoy, 15 minutes every day. Yep. And the last thing, get a piece of string or get a measuring tape and check and take some action. Yep, because the problems are not going to go away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. We unfortunately don't have time for Q&A. Okay, but I think we have some excellent workable tips from you. The waist height ratio,
yep,
and the stress factor and the sleep was all very, very good. I saw a couple of questions. Maybe we have time for one question. Someone had asked, is it a good idea to sleep after lunch? A lot of IFAs out here, they have a good lunch and they want to know that.
It's a very, very good question. And actually, it's actually biological, right? And again, I'm not excusing people that they have a nap after lunch. But you know why you feel sleepy after lunch? Let's think about that. Why do you feel sleepy after lunch? Good food. Yeah, it's like a big elasapad, right? Something after a big meal. But there's a reason we get drowsy. It's biological. If you have any meal that's very high in carbs, you know what your body does? It sends all the blood supply to your digestive system. And you get drowsy. Again, I'm not excusing the nap, but there's actually a very legitimate biological reason. If you have a very big meal, and the big meals usually have a lot of rice or a lot of carbs, your body is shunting all the blood supply to your digestive system and you will be drowsy. You don't have a choice. It's like a midnight snack. At night you feel like having a snack. Again, your body thinks you're under stress because you haven't slept. And it says, I need food to deal with the stress, and you get hungry. But it's actually biological. So I would say, it's not you that you're feeling drowsy, your body is engineered to make you drowsy after a big meal. Right? A good check is to actually then have a more balanced meal. Okay? Is if you reduce the starch in the meal, you'll find you suddenly don't get drowsy anymore. And your energy levels are in this way during the day. Yep? Make sense? Okay. So the nap is perfectly okay, but I'd rather you revisit the meal.
Okay, thank you. May I invite on stage Mr. Adesh Kumar Jain to give a memento to Mr. Kannan Raman, please?